Furry, fluffy, and fun. Animals bring joy to the lives of the royals. Over the years, they've gathered quite the collection.
The president of Cameroon gifted Queen Elizabeth II an African forest elephant called Jumbo.
He was gifted some flamingos that used to be in the lake at Buckingham Palace.
And now, with these top tips, you too can take on the animal kingdom as only a king or queen can.
I think the lions were used by the reigning monarch to slightly intimidate visitors to the tower.
Animals play an important part at royal events, like trooping the colour.
King Charles III rode a horse called Noble, which was given to him by the Canadian Mounties.
But they also offer a slice of normality. After all, a corgi doesn't care who you are.
They bring you down to the same level. You are loved because you justify that love.
This is your royal guide to animals, and how you too can remain as poised as a princess when faced with creatures great and small. Young or old, it's not just people that the royal family connect with.
I think there's a very strong link between monarchy and the animal kingdom.
They keep animals, they breed animals. The royal family really have a great relationship with animals.
It's a passion that has been passed down over many generations, dating back to a time where animals weren't simply pets. They were symbols of status, often used to mark the arrival of the king. When James VI entered London in March 1604, an array of festivities were laid on for him, one of which was bull baiting.
Bull baiting was a particularly violent sport involving animals. Bulls and dogs would be put in a pit together, facing it off in a fight to the death in honour of the incoming monarch.
In Queen Anne's time, a large area of London was given over to a bull ring so that huge crowds could come along and witness this very violent sport.
But even further back in history, animals were used to elevate a monarch.
If we go back to the medieval period and earlier, this was a time when kings and sometimes even queens would lead their soldiers into battle, often on horseback, leading a cavalry charge.
Horses were a symbol of power on the battlefield, quite literally raising the likes of Henry VIII and Elizabeth I above their soldiers. But they aren't the only animals royals have taken to war. History is littered with animal mascots standing alongside their royal masters. Today, the armed forces is a veritable menagerie of animal mascots. From black bucks and Shetland ponies, to goats gifted to the Royal Welsh in 1884 by Queen Victoria from her royal herd. But historically, one animal crops up again and again when personally escorting the monarch to battle.
On the field of battle, what a king would often want with them would be his dog as his mascot. And we see this with things like greyhounds, dachshunds. This is a tradition within the royal family.
On the 2nd of July, 1644, the cousin of King Charles II, Prince Rupert, led an army at the Battle of Marston Moor as part of the English Civil War. But he wasn't alone. Stood alongside him was the army mascot, a white pet poodle called Boy.
Boy became quite a celebrity of his day because Rupert would take Boy along on his military campaigns, and it was said that he played quite a prominent role in these various battles, so much so that people started to whisper that the dog had some kind of magical powers because it seemed invincible.
Poodles were rare at the time, and Boy's white colouring meant he stood out on the battlefield.
Well, sadly, Boy was killed in the Battle of Marston Moor. And this seemed to put an end to royal dogs taking part in battles or military campaigns.
Boy was just one in a long line of royal canines. Both before and since, they have been great royal companions. They say a dog is a man's best friend, and that has never been truer for a family than for our royal family. It all started with one king in particular.
King Charles II, if you like, the Paris Hilton of his day, great lover of the handbag dog, in his case, the toy spaniel. He wouldn't go anywhere without his spaniels.
The king became so synonymous with the breed that it was named after him.
They became known as the Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, and he actually passed a law so that they could come with him, accessing what were, if you like, off-limits areas, like the House of Parliament.
Over the years, each king or queen has had their personal preferences.
Henry VIII had bejewelled collars made for his dogs, and his beloved second wife, Anne Boleyn, had a lap dog called Percoy, which was sort of on the French meaning why, because the little dog apparently had a very quizzical expression.
Queen Victoria was reported as saying, "Nothing will turn a man's house into a castle more quickly and effectively than a dachshund."
William and Kate have had dogs. They had a Cocker Spaniel called Lupo for many years, very central to their family life.
But there's one monarch above all others who is synonymous with the love of dogs. Queen Elizabeth II.
People said that the corgis would enter the room before the Queen did, and that's how you knew the Queen was coming.
But it was a love affair that started long before Elizabeth became queen.
Her father, King George VI, actually brought home a pair of corgis, and the Queen absolutely fell in love with these dogs, and she was gifted her own corgi called Susan when she was 18 years old.
A lot of the corgis that she subsequently owned were descended from Susan.
The late queen bred this bloodline of corgis for 14 generations, often keeping many of the puppies for herself.
That's mother, daughter, Linnet, Linnet's daughters, brother, Linnet's other children.
And over the years, these corgis were seen everywhere with Elizabeth.
They saw a lot of Scotland and a lot of London.
They go on private jets or private planes.
But every Friday afternoon, we'd pack the car up, and 3 o'clock, we'd travel down to Windsor Castle, along with 11 corgis. 2 or 3 of them would always get into the footwell with the police officer sitting in the front, 2 or 3 on the back, and all the rest would get onto the parcel shelf.
These corgis were certainly treated like royalty.
And the food was brought up by a member of staff on a big silver tray.
But they weren't always well behaved.
They were not especially well trained, and they were treated rather as a flock, as a group.
Pet psychologist Roger Mugford was asked to step in when things got out of hand.
The problem that I was called to attend to was that there had been big fights. Several corgis were fighting one another, and that was a source of great danger and concern to the royal household.
Roger is the perfect person to teach you how to turn your problem pooch into a diamond dog.
Cocker Spaniels just have a fantastic intelligence, great problem-solving ability.
Cockers are used by the royal family as gun dogs when out on a shoot.
So Maisie's jolly nearly the perfect dog, isn't she? But she doesn't retrieve, and being a cocker, a working cocker, we want her to work for a living, don't we? So this little device here allows me to put food inside, and the only way she can gain access to it is by bringing it back to me. So here we go. Off you go. She thinks she can break in and get it herself. Excuse me, Maisie. You rely on me, and I'm not going to reward this.
Roger needs another tactic to get Maisie to bring it all the way back.
So we're going to enforce retrieval by having her on a long line, which is a 10-metre long lead, basically, and allows me to manage her at a distance without physically touching her. Maisie, come on, darling. We do have penalties, but penalties doesn't mean harsh punishment, beating dogs, choke chains, electric shocks. It means often the withdrawal or the delay of treats. So this, to her right now, is a punishment. Go fetch. And fetch. Maisie, come. Maisie, come. All the way, all the way. Maisie, come. And sit. And sit. And drop. Good girl. She's learned it all.
Another dog trained like a royal pooch. In 2002, Princess Anne needed Roger's help after her bull terrier Dottie, a little bit like this one, got into a spot of bother.
The attack took place in Windsor Great Park, where the princess and her husband were staying after the death of the Queen Mother. As they left private land at the end of a walk, one of their dogs, Dorothy, or Dottie, ran after a group of children on bicycles, biting two of them.
There was a court case, and Princess Anne was taken before Slough Magistrates Court for an offence under the Dangerous Dogs Act, 1991.
Depending on the severity of the bite, the court has the power to issue everything from fines and prison time to orders to destroy a dog.
The judge, though, agreed with the defence that Dorothy was normally docile and should not be put down. But Princess Anne still left court with a criminal record and a small, for her at least, legal bill.
I had to train this dog to not chase bicycles, and this I think we did successfully. So I got on a bike and rode it, and on cue Dottie was released and did indeed attack me, but I was equipped with a remote control device that released a press of release of fresh air, and that was then repeated by Anne's family. Even a bull terrier can be trained not to attack children on bicycles, and Dottie lived to a ripe old age.
Naughty or not, these pet dogs mean the world to their royal owners. But they aren't the only regal creatures. The royal family have been collecting animals from around the world for centuries. The more exotic, the better. The royal family have been keeping dogs for centuries, whether as war mascots, pets, or working dogs. And in many ways, the life of a royal dog is as good as it gets. But really, the royal family need these dogs more than the dogs need them.
It doesn't matter whether you're rich, poor, royal or normal. Dogs bring us all down to the same level of it's a one-to-one relationship.
They provide an unusual slice of normality for a royal. And with such a close bond, it's hard to say goodbye.
When he was Prince of Wales, King Charles had a dog that he absolutely adored called Tigger, who was like a best friend.
Tigger went everywhere with Charles, relaxing in the Highgrove Gardens and even attending polo matches. When Tigger passed in 2002, at the ripe old age of 18, it had a big impact on the now king.
At the time, the then prince was devastated, so I really felt for him. And he never got another dog after that.
Charles chose to memorialise Tigger through a willow sculpture at his Highgrove home. But historically, the monarch remembers their lost companions in the Royal Pet Cemetery.
The pet cemetery at Sandringham is on a quiet part of the estate, and this is where royal pets traditionally have been buried. Queen Elizabeth II's corgi Susan was buried there.
Along with many of the other dogs Elizabeth subsequently owned. But dogs aren't the only royal pet. Over the years, the royal family have had some more unconventional animal companions.
Henry VIII, a man known for his violent temper and often violent passions, was a great bird lover. So much so that he had nightingales and canaries hanging in cages in the windows of Hampton Court.
Catherine of Aragon had a real love of monkeys, and she had several of them at court. And in fact, one of the most famous paintings of Catherine shows her with a monkey on her lap.
The late Queen Elizabeth even had a pet chameleon in the 1940s. But this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to more unusual royal animals. Perhaps surprisingly, the most exotic royal animals have come in the form of gifts. Buying a gift for a royal can be tough. What do you give to those who have everything?
Monarchs are given all sorts of rare gifts, and unusual animals was something rather remarkable and to be collected.
Kings would pride themselves in having extraordinary collections of exotic creatures from around the world, and it would be a sign of friendship to send another king a lion or a bear or whatever it was.
In 1235, King Henry III was gifted 3 lions.
From that point onwards, his Plantagenet crest also featured these creatures. The same 3 lions that today we see on the England football shirt.
This inspired him to transform the Tower of London into a zoo, into a menagerie.
As the trend for rulers to exchange rare and strange animals continued, the lions were joined at the Tower of London by an African elephant, gifted by the King of France, along with beavers, monkeys, and in 1252, King Henry III was even given a polar bear.
One poor man, who was an employee of the royal family, was given the task of keeper of the polar bear. So his job was to go swimming with the polar bear in the River Thames so that the polar bear could hunt for fish.
The Royal Menagerie became one of the country's first tourist attractions. People flocked from far and wide to see the 60 different species on show, and one in particular thrived.
The lions then became a very popular part of the Royal Menagerie, and actually a whole part of the tower was named after them, the Lion Tower, and it was known as that for centuries, because as you were approaching the tower, you would hear the lions start to roar.
There would be lions at the tower for some 600 years. But in 1835, at the request of the newly formed Royal Society of the Protection of Animals, the Royal Menagerie closed. 150 of the 300 animals there were taken to Regent's Park to form the beginnings of London Zoo. An attraction that has continued to have a royal connection ever since. Whilst originally a place for royals to house any animals they were gifted, London Zoo has since taken on a life of its own.
Originally not open to the public, it was a place where the scientists, gentlemen scientists at that time, came to study animals.
In 1829, the zoo was granted a royal charter by King George IV. Just 2 years later, in 1831, King William IV then became the zoo's first patron.
Ever since then, the reigning monarch has been our patron. And that's been a really important link for us as a royal society, for a monarchy which has always been known for its interest in and care for animals and wildlife. It's a link that we treasure.
It's a role many kings and queens have taken seriously, making frequent visits over the years.
Queen Victoria used to love coming to London Zoo. She came in 1850 to see our new hippopotamus, Abeche.
The late Queen Elizabeth II also spent time at the zoo.
As a child, she would come here with her sister and see the animals. And then When she became queen, she would come back reasonably often to launch new enclosures, new exhibits, the Land of the Lions or our new Elephant Care Centre at Whipsnade.
London Zoo and Whipsnade also remain the go-to homes for more recent animal gifts.
In 1972, the President of Cameroon gifted Queen Elizabeth II an African forest elephant called Jumbo. He had this famous in-flight meal of bananas, avocados and cane sugar. He arrived weighing almost 600 kilograms.
Whilst today there are no longer royal menageries, and zoos are about education rather than keeping animals in cages, there is still one creature that calls the Tower of London home: the ravens. Ravens are lucky. They have been considered a good omen since Roman times, something the royal family takes seriously. Joint Chief Curator at the Historic Royal Palaces, Tracy Borman, can attest to this.
Tradition has it that at least 6 ravens must be kept at the Tower of London, because if any less than that are there, then the monarchy will fall.
A superstition that supposedly started with King Charles II in the 17th century.
I can tell you that it still continues to this day, so clearly nobody wants to take the risk of disobeying this tradition.
It's taken so seriously that there's even someone designated to look after them: the Raven Master.
As a Raven Master, I've been looking after the Tower of London Ravens now for 10 years. We believe that ravens can be as intelligent as a 2 to 3 year old child. They're certainly much more intelligent than I am.
He's the only person at the Tower of London who can tell the difference between them and also knows the different territories that they like to inhabit.
This is Melina. She's quite a famous raven, actually. She appears quite a lot on my social media.
It's a long-established position, and it's now one of the most sought after at the Tower of London.
Whilst the Raven Master can get up close and personal with these birds, members of the public are best to keep their distance.
I find them beautiful, intelligent, magnificent animals, but they can be quite daunting to the public as they come in here. All the ravens that are out and about around the tower during the daytime, I wouldn't suggest anybody to go near them. They are wild and they do bite.
But the ravens at the tower aren't the only winged creatures whose loyalties lie with the king. Creating a buzz across the royal households are tens of thousands of bees, not guarding the crown jewels like the ravens, but another precious commodity. These royal bees are busy making honey. Clarence House has 2 beehives, whilst Buckingham Palace has 4.
They actually produce enough honey within those parts of the royal estate to keep them self-sufficient for the whole year. So about 300 jars of honey a year are produced on these royal estates.
They are used for everything, from the king's breakfast.
King Charles III does like a teaspoon of honey in his tea.
To garden parties, and even to make some money.
Sandringham shop actually sells honey that is made from the royal bees.
And whilst you may not associate bees with the same loyalties to their owners as perhaps the royal dogs, the bees might disagree.
When the late Queen died, the royal beekeeper informed the bees that they had a change of master, because according to a long-established custom, that was necessary because the bees might stop producing honey if they weren't told that the monarch had died and that somebody else was now in charge.
Although not all bees are fans of the royals.
In 2018, Prince Harry was delivering a speech at his father's 70th birthday party and got attacked by a bee.
To save an input, sorry, that bee really got me.
The royals' love for animals isn't confined to those kept as pets or in zoos. it also takes them out into the wild. With a long history of conservation projects spread across the globe. Whilst the royal family may be known for their love of hunting, both historically with the likes of Henry VIII, or more recently when they stay on the Sandringham or Balmoral estates, they are also staunch protectors of the animal kingdom, supporting more than 100 charities focusing on conservation, a cause they have been championing for 1,000 years.
Wildlife conservation has been a really important part of the royal family's charitable work for a long time.
And one royal in particular was a driving force.
Prince Philip actually became very known for it, and he was very interested in conservation, sustainability.
The Duke of Edinburgh was absolutely pivotal in creating our scientific institute, the Institute of Zoology, which now has 140 scientists working on conservation biology.
Most notably, he was president of the World Wildlife Fund.
As president of the world's most influential conservation organization, Prince Philip had proved a tireless campaigner for his charity.
And he oversaw that organisation for more than 2 decades, really promoting the protection of endangered species.
But I mean, we're putting, quite unreasonable and increasing pressure on the whole of the natural system of the globe.
It's a passion Philip has passed down the generations, with both his grandsons now taking on his mantle. Prince William has been a staunch campaigner for the conservation of endangered species through the charity Tusk.
Africa's wildlife is truly special. What the awards alumni, their dedicated teams and local communities are protecting is one of the great natural treasures of the world.
Their involvement has, for almost 200 years, help to direct attention to the importance of nature, the importance of conserving wildlife, the importance of creating a world in which wildlife can thrive.
The royals certainly do their bit to protect the animal kingdom, but that's nothing new. They have been protecting one species for centuries. Swans living on the River Thames in London and Windsor have the highest order of royal guardianship.
The King has the right to claim any swan swimming in open waters under the royal prerogative, if he so wishes.
Whilst today it seems irrelevant that King Charles III has the right to all swans, historically, this royal prerogative was very important. Swans were a much-loved feature of royal banquets and were therefore reserved for the tables of the select few chosen by the king.
We do know that in 966, King Edgar gave permission to the monks of Croyland in Lincolnshire to own swans.
Whilst today, swan is no longer on the menu, they are a protected species, and the royals take this responsibility very seriously. Mostly through a rather unusual 800-year-old tradition.
There is a really old-fashioned ritual that happens in the warmer months called swan upping, which is really, it's a census of swans.
It happens in July each year, usually the 3rd week, so we go from Sunbury to Thames to Abingdon. It is a 5-day journey. We travel in 6 traditional rowing skiffs that can be over 100 years old, and they were used in Edwardian times. Each family of swans that we come across, the first man in the boat will shout out, "All up!" And that is the signal that we have a swan catch. We tie their legs and then we take them ashore. We will weigh them, measure them, and most importantly, we will check them for any injuries. Swan upping now is all about conservation in education, and that's the way that we're driving it.
But swans aren't the only birds that our royals have a passion for. Some members of the family have been known to enjoy passing the time hidden in a hide, watching and waiting for passing birds. Birdwatching is somewhat a British passion. There are over 3 million twitchers across the country. Some of the most famous have been royalty.
People might not realise that Prince Philip was really interested in birds and a really passionate bird watcher. He became interested in this when he travelled around the world in 1956.
Taking a grand tour on the Royal Yacht Britannia, Philip fell in love with the pastime.
He went from the Pacific Islands to Antarctica, and he took a great interest in birds because there's such a variety of birds between the two parts of the world. He took a lot of photographs, and he wrote a book called Birds from Britannia.
It was a passion Philip continued for the rest of his life, serving as patron of the British Trust for Ornithology for more than 30 years. Also, a simple pleasure to share with his wife. They had matching hides on the Sandringham estate. And the late Queen had a loft there, housing one type of bird in particular. Whilst today pigeons might not be what you associate with the royal family, they've been part of royal life for more than 100 years.
In 1886, King Leopold II, King of the Belgians, gave some pigeons as a gift to the royal family in Britain, and they were used to start up a pigeon loft on the Sandringham estate.
And all the way through the 20th century, royals enjoyed using them for sport.
Now, both Edward VII and George V took a keen interest in pigeon racing, and many of their birds went on to win international fame in pigeon racing.
But these pigeons were medal winners in many guises. When war broke out in 1914, royal animals were put to work.
Pigeons from the royal loft were used as carrier pigeons during the First and Second World Wars.
Most of the time they made the journey. Occasionally they'd be shot down or get caught in a barrage. But they were very useful means of getting messages, certainly in the Second World War, to the resistance. They were an important and key element of communication.
And one of those pigeons, called Royal Blue, actually won a medal for gallantry because it had distinguished itself in its military service.
After the Second World War, these gallant pigeons were able to return to what they loved best.
The pigeons were once more used for pigeon racing, something that the late Queen took a great interest in, and some of her pigeons went on to win national and even international medals for racing.
Pigeons aren't the only royal animals that have racing form. Queen Elizabeth II also owned more than 100 racehorses at the time of her death. And the family loved nothing more than watching them compete at one of the most prestigious events in the racing calendar. A 5-day equestrian event in June, Royal Ascot has long been loved by members of the royal family. Their carriage entrance a now iconic image.
Ascot Week opens in a blaze of sunshine as the royal cavalcade enters the famous Golden Gates.
People don't just want to go to Ascot, they want to go to Royal Ascot, and they want to see, key members of the royal family.
But it isn't just royal by name. This event was created thanks to one royal's passion for horses.
Ascot Racecourse was founded by Queen Anne in the year 1711. She thought it an ideal place for horses to gallop.
A stone's throw away from the Windsor estate, Anne transformed empty heathland into an upmarket course. And as a reminder of these origins, even today the first race is always the Queen Anne Stakes.
With their majesties here, and the promise of fine weather, Ascot lives up to its finest traditions.
It's an event that has been enjoyed by many royals over the years. George IV, Queen Victoria, George VI, but none more so than Queen Elizabeth II.
And I always thought it was interesting that in the latter years of her life, when she really did scale back a lot of her engagements, a lot of her travel, she still went to Royal Ascot every single day.
Unlike other members of the royal family, Elizabeth was somewhat invested in the results. Over the years, the late Queen had a number of winners.
One of the chauffeurs used to love a little flutter. He always used to put a pound or two on all the Queen's horses, and whenever they were racing, and he always told me at the end of the season he was in profit, so she must have done quite well.
But perhaps the greatest was in 2013, when her horse Estimate won the Gold Cup, making her the first reigning monarch to win the prestigious prize.
It was always a great occasion when the Queen won. She won at most racecourses, but the one race that eluded her, she never won the Epsom Derby, which is a great shame. But racing is racing, and you don't pull up a horse just to let the Queen's horse win.
Watching the action from the royal box, Ascot may be a fun day out, but it doesn't entirely satisfy the family's competitive streak. From Olympic events to polo in the park, the royal family love nothing more than taking part and horsing around in competitions themselves.
Joanna kolansa butoku kemasu Kotaki suki manasi harikan itu Konto sihatnya kita Hikasaki marisa Genzanaki haritu Hirai mosi gesi
Although the royals have a great love for animals, and particularly their pampered pooches, there is one creature they hold dearly within their hearts, and that's horses. Whether they're riding at big stake events like Trooping the Colour, or just for fun.
The late Queen was a very keen rider, and she's passed that on to the younger generation, because I know for a fact that Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, she actually taught them as well.
But while some family members are content with a simple trot around the estate, Others like the buzz of competition. The late Queen's granddaughter, Zara Phillips, has won multiple international championship medals. And King Charles, Prince William and Harry have all been seen enjoying a game of polo.
On the ball, father takes over.
Even if it does lead to arguments about cleaning boots.
I always clean them. I played yesterday, I didn't have a chance. If someone else will do it for you. Huh.
A love of competition is clearly in the genes. Whilst many royal athletic achievements hit the headlines, Prince Philip somewhat kept his sporting endeavours quiet, particularly his love of carriage driving.
Carriage driving is a sport that Prince Philip was very much a pioneer of. So when he stopped playing polo, when he became a little bit older, he wanted something else to focus his attentions on, and carriage driving was what he came up with.
The perfect sport to combine his love of both competition and horses.
And I suddenly thought, well, we've got horses and carriages and grooms. I said, well, why don't I have a go? So I borrowed 4 horses from the stables in London, took them to Norfolk and practiced, and thought, well, why not?
Often driving with close friend Penny Natchbull, over the years, Philip learnt his craft, eventually becoming one of the most respected drivers in the world, even shaping the way the sport was run.
He established a set of rules that would be consistent through the sport in different countries. So he made the international rules that everybody followed.
And nobody knows how to drive a carriage around a cross-country course better than someone Philip inspired, Rowena Moyse. The first thing you need if you want to get involved in the sport is the carriage itself.
Prince Philip always drove British-made carriages. This carriage is fitted with independent suspension all round, so that it's good, very good on the cornering at speed. It's probably one of the most high-tech carriages in the country.
And it's important to choose the right kind of horse too.
Your wheelers, which are the two pulling the carriage, they've got to be strong, stocky and steady. They do all the hard work. The ones up front have to be thinkers.
Rowena's personal favourites are Welsh ponies.
It's definitely brains, not brawn, with Welsh ponies. Prince Philip drove fell ponies, another native breed. They're a little bit steadier than the Welsh, not quite so sharp and spirited. Off we go, ponies. Let's go. Let's go. Come on. Good boys. Good boys.
To complete a cross-country carriage driving course, you have to successfully negotiate a series of obstacles designed to test your technical skills.
When you're doing obstacles, you really have to be able to make them turn and keep the inside wheeler to the outside leader to get your tight turns. Come. Come, come, go on, come. Come, there you can really see a turn.
It's not all about the horses though. The carriage team have a job to do too.
Peter, right at the back, is in charge of keeping us the right way. So he's leaning into the turns to make sure wheel doesn't come up off the ground. And as you can see, he has to really get his weight over from one side to another. Seth, on the other hand, at the top, higher up, she is making sure I go the right way around the main course.
Fast-moving, with precise control of horses, it's clear to see why Prince Philip was such a fan. And he enjoyed being just another competitor.
He always felt relaxed amongst the driving people. Sometimes you would be walking through the cones course or an obstacle course, and you might just pass comment like you would with any other competitor. So you never felt he was any different to the rest of us.
Philip continued to drive carriages well into his 90s.
He still drove carriage months before his death in April 2021. He was seen in Windsor, I think, sort of late 2020.
My last memory of Prince Philip was when he was actually following us around Windsor Park. I was competing and he was following us from obstacle to obstacle.
And it's a skill he passed on to the next generation.
We've seen Lady Louise Windsor do carriage riding as well, so clearly something that she shared with her grandfather, their love of that sport there, and she actually rode his carriage for the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, and that must have been, you know, quite a special moment for Queen Elizabeth to see that.
Lady Louise and her mother Sophie also rode carriages together at one of the late Queen's favourite horsey events of the year, the Royal Windsor Horse Show.
The Royal Windsor Horse Show is essentially a sort of celebration of all things equestrian. It's a convening event for people who are passionate about horses and horse riding and all things connected.
It is a show of international status. It is a show where riders compete.
An event held in the grounds of the Windsor estate. It has been a favourite in the royal calendar since its inception in 1943.
The Royal Windsor Horse Show was established originally to help raise funds for the war effort, and it was the Royal Horse and Dog Show when it began. But then dogs were banned after one of them stole a piece of chicken from the plate of George VI.
Filled with all manner of events, from dressage and show jumping to carriage driving and pony classes, it was much loved by Queen Elizabeth II.
Well, it was important to the Queen in that it was her own backyard, so it was something that she could just pop down and see whenever she wanted to.
She visited multiple times every year and entered many of her own homebred horses and ponies. It's a place where the late Queen was celebrated.
There was celebratory pageants held at the show for her Diamond Jubilee, her 90th birthday, and for her Platinum Jubilee.
Her Platinum Jubilee saw numerous animal tributes to her 70 years on the throne. Her beloved corgis taking centre stage. And the general public got fully involved. A perfect example of how important and loved animals are by the royal family. Whether it's spending a day at the races or curling up with a dog on the sofa, animals allow the royals a taste of normality.
The nice thing about animals is they bring you down to the same level. You are loved because you justify that love.
They've offered the royals companionship and cause across the centuries, and it looks as if that's set to continue. After all, a corgi doesn't care if you're king.